Right, so generally, at this moment in time at least, it does feel like AEW has done, well, everything. They've signed every hot free agent, they've promoted every single style of wrestling, and it's all been a pretty damn fun ride, hasn't it? There are many, many, many moments you have undoubtedly forgotten, which brings us to this list on that lovely positive note. Because I am Gareth, this is What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 AEW moments you totally don't remember. Number 10, Wardlow's introductory vignette. At All Out 2019, a vignette was shown heralding the arrival of a Wardlow. This was, well, it was inexplicable. The upstart sports-adjacent promotion with no developmental system had just signed a new talent that had escaped the radar of even the ultra-hardcore fringes of the online fandom. The initial presentation of the character was jarring, framed in a scene that radiated 80s energy. Wardlow, complete with a Terminator-style scar and mandatory hot babe, beat the crap out of loads of people at once. It was a strange vignette, and a bit too grimly lit and Zack Snyder to resonate as the badass action movie short it was intended to be. Instead, it resonated as a drab, gritty reboot of an old-school Fed vignette. The Terminator character was dropped, unsurprisingly, and Wardlow instead debuted as MJF's Heater, in what was a far better story shot through the lens of pro wrestling. Now, I've got a quick question for you. What is your favourite wrestling vignette of all time? Probably not the Wardlow one, but you let me know in the comment section down below what is. Number 9, the Dark Order recruit Alex Reynolds via TV set. The Dark Order have sadly outlived their usefulness now, but at least they were useful at one point. That's something to be proud of in my book. In 2020 and 2021, the act was instrumental in presenting Hangman Page as an upstanding dude who'd rather lose alongside some well-intentioned geeks than win the wrong way. In late 2020, though, the Dark Order was entirely useless. They are spooky, and some out-of-shape extras follow them around wasn't a particularly great opening pitch. AEW soon pivoted to a Scientology-adjacent repackage. This enabled the use of the dreaded and supposedly banned invisible camera, in a strange vignette that undermined the sports-based promise of AEW's early PR. The Beaver Boys, jobbers in AEW's early phase, were naturally preyed upon by the Dark Order. The idea itself wasn't completely terrible, but the execution was absolutely criminal. John Silver and Alex Reynolds were recruited through a television set on the December 11th Dynamite. The Dark Order communicated to Reynolds with the apparent use of magic. Either that or they were hackers, the Ministry of Darkness, or Retribution. Either way, it was hardly battle art, was it? Number 8, Chris Jericho teases the arrival of Marty SKR. Prior to his naming and the speaking out allegations, Marty SKR was a wanted man in the wrestling business. His Ring of Honor contract was set to expire in November 2019. Ring of Honor, drifting into the abyss, wanted to retain his services. WWE, nowhere near the abyss but intent on heaving the competition into it, also scouted Marty's services. AEW wanted him allegedly as the leader of the Dark Order, in what, at the time, would have been a very neat continuation of the storyline in which he was left behind on being the elite. This all felt like his obvious destination. AEW seemingly thought they had him too, as teased on the December 4th Dynamite. Then AEW World Champion Chris Jericho unveiled his lexicon of Le Champion, on which he revealed the names of men he refused to wrestle in what remained of 2019. A means of building the anticipation ahead of his match with Jon Moxley folded into a comedy bit. Jericho was soon interrupted by Jurassic Express, and the timing of said interruption was notable. Jericho, cued up by the very first note of their theme, suddenly said Marty and then intentionally trailed off, knowing it was a natural time at which to do it. The idea was to trust AEW's super dedicated base to pick up on the Easter egg. Such a match never happened, of course. Before he was disgraced, Skull re-signed with Ring of Honor as talent and head booker. Bullet dodged, you could say. Number 7, CM Punk's budding friendship with Hangman Page. You definitely remember what happened between CM Punk and Hangman Page. I mean, how could we ever forget? You could argue, in fact, that AEW, almost 2 full years later, is still reeling from the fallout. It hasn't quite felt the same since, has it? And even in storylines, the spectre of CM Punk haunts everything. The misfire of an ongoing authority figure storyline, so forced that Dax Harwood's rah-rah speech was heckled on Collision recently, was driven by the Young Bucks feeling aggrieved that Jack Perry was punished for his role in the infamous backstage fight at All In London. What you may not remember is that CM Punk, early in his Happy to Be Here run, seemed to want to actually befriend Hangman Page. Punk, as the only happy poster on wrestling Twitter, put over a returning Hangman Page as he claimed victory in the Casino Ladder match on the October 6, 2021 Dynamite, tweeting Cowboy S-word. He didn't say S-word. A month prior, after a Dynamite taping, Punk and Page serenaded the crowd with a rendition of Take Me Home Country Roads to send them home happy. Punk also, in January 2022, asked Page on Twitter if he could borrow his chaps. It was all so lovely. Page didn't respond to these friendly overtures, obviously. He eventually blamed Punk for freezing Colt Cabana out the company instead. But did all of this happen because Punk simply felt spurned? We'll probably never know, will we? So moving on, number 6, early experiments with a different presentation. AEW turned into a sports entertainment promotion so gradually that you barely even noticed. For example, on any given week, you'll now see a wrestler appear on the big screen in order to interrupt an in-ring promo. Recently, Sky Blue did precisely this in order to set up an impromptu match. Something else that WWE might as well have patented against Mercedes money. How did Sky do this? By magic? Did she commandeer the production crew? Or is this just something that, while illogical, has always happened in wrestling, so why shouldn't AEW do it? Probably that one. AEW, in a bid to differentiate itself from WWE, used to be far more careful with this sort of thing. In contrast, Sammy Guevara once did something similar in the build towards Full Gear 2019, except it at least made slightly more sense since he was known for his vlogs back then. When making saves, AEW would resist the temptation of blasting a wrestler's entrance theme when they made the save for the sake of an easy pop. And the early wild brawls between the Elite and the Inner Circle felt far more realistic and lively and spontaneous as a result. Oh, I wish those days were back. Cheers for checking out this What Culture Wrestling video today, my friend, and if you're enjoying what you're watching, then hit that subscribe button down below for more of this sort of stuff in your life. Number 5, subverting the TV format. AEW once actually tried to subvert the TV format on occasion. The idea was to disassociate fans from WWE's uber-produced, fake-feeling world. Back in 2019, WWE's format was heavily convenient. Everything fit just all too neatly into the 3-hour runtime of Monday Night Raw, and nothing felt remotely realistic. To combat this, on the 4th ever episode of Dynamite, Jon Moxley and Pac went to a no contest when the broadcast went off the air. This wasn't a production botch. This was AEW's attempt to put over the idea that TV time remaining was a real possibility, ensuring that future televised main events would be wrestled and received with more urgency. Back in the days when the rankings were in place and actually mattered, the finish also served a dual purpose, as Mox's failure to win prolonged his quest to become the #1 contender to Chris Jericho's world title. Along similar lines, Orange Cassidy in 2021 defeated Jack Evans in picture-in-picture. AEW attempted to condition fans to stick with the action. AEW matches might end even when it is inconvenient to the viewing experience, all to add a more realistic tenor to the show. Ultimately, these devices didn't really matter, and nor did they continue, but it was still a refreshing attempt all the same. Number 4, another cool detail. As mentioned, AEW sadly feels like just another sports entertainment company these days. Just consider this. Against an ugly LED backdrop in front of fans who are often quieter than they once were, the real founder of the company appears as an on-screen authority figure in the midst of a power struggle. In the meantime, a recent #1 contender was handed the shot because some heels with power favored him. Several acclaimed internet darlings struggle for TV time and always seem to end up losing to the established, over-familiar old guard. In isolation, all of that describes Vince McMahon's WWE at various points over the 21st century. In 2024, though, it also describes All Elite Wrestling. What is happening? It wasn't always like this, was it? AEW used to consistently sprinkle in tiny, loving details in order to present itself as the promised sports-oriented product. Mostly inconsequential details, sure, but ones that nonetheless enhance the old feeling. In an example of a cool trope AEW hasn't revisited nearly enough, when a Hook FTW title defense once lasted mere seconds on Rampage, Buddy Matthews vs Serpentico, a standby match, was added to the Rampage lineup in August 2022. AEW should do this way more often, especially as the show in recent months has developed almost unconsciously a more sports entertainment feel. Number 3, Cody and Chris Jericho's authority figure storyline. Cody and Chris Jericho built their rivalry well before Full Gear 2019 on the very first entries in the AEW broadcast canon, the Road to Double or Nothing 2019 series. Curiously, given AEW's early "we won't do what WWE does" mission statements, they did so through the vehicle of an authority figure storyline. This was a very, very WWE thing to do by the company that marketed itself as the WWE alternative. In essence, Chris Jericho played the big-headed top star with a list of egotistical demands that drew Cody's ire. This device felt incongruous to the idea that the key wrestlers had set up a wrestling company precisely to get away from such BS on-screen dynamics. And even as a new twist on it, this was still a bad idea. The execution was actually really good in and of itself, though. Chris Jericho was magnificent as the petulant a-hole who received every fair Cody decision as a slight. He even hilariously referred to Cody as Cody Khan. The menace of his spiraling ego was very amusing, but AEW dropped that thread, and really, thank God for that. Absolutely nobody needed the stars to be drones reduced within a network of power. Number 2, the original shoot fight. On the AEW Dynamite broadcast on September 16, 2020, Thunder Rosa defended the NWA Women's title against Ivelisse. Ivelisse did not fancy selling and sat stone-faced in a hold. She looked like she wasn't allowed allowed a ride in the supermarket trolley, and in an ironic punishment decided to simply not move. It was a feisty encounter that manifested with both good, hard-hitting wrestling and some stiff shoot blows. It was a super rare return of the political awkwardness once thought lost to a generation that wasn't terrified of reprisal. But it also was not actually the first shoot fight in AEW history. That, honor belongs to B. Priestley and Sadie Gibbs, who had All Out 2019 went off script in an incident informed by residual social media drama. Gibbs, in January 2019, left a tour of Japan through bereavement. Will, I can't believe it's not a Premier League footballer, Ospreay then buried her for it. Ospreay's then girlfriend, B, pounded Gibbs in the midst of the match, yelling stupid over and over again, channeling her inner Randy Orton. Gibbs then floored her with a gorilla press drop, but B just no-sold it. Not in a pop-up fighting spirit kind of way, but in an F-off I'm not selling for you kind of way, and immediately eliminated her. And the fight, before it was broken up, also threatened to explode backstage. So now you know, or remember, or whatever. Number 1, the fact that December 18th was mostly a damn good show. December 18th sends a chill down the spines of most AEW fans. A feeling not unlike losing a derby, and this was almost literally the case, since a fabulous NXT show defeated Dynamite in both overall viewership and the key demo. Before the Dark Order drew cricket by destroying the Elite though, here's what actually happened on the December 18th episode of AEW Dynamite. Kenny Omega and Hangman Page lost to the Lucha Brothers in, a few glaring botches aside, a tremendous TV wrestling match. Cody and Darby Allin defeated the Butcher and the Blade to set up their second great singles match and advance the Cody vs MJF feud. Chris Jericho went to a time limit draw with Jungle Boy in what was probably a nicer endeavor than it was a great wrestling match, but still an attempt was made to get an emerging talent over. Chris Statlander defeated Britt Baker in a measure of AEW's meritocracy. The act that got over went over the act that did not. And in a main event that ruled before the post-match bed crapping, SCU defeated the Young Bucks in a cracking underrated sprint. What a damn show that was. Now yes, having a creeper kick Kenny Omega's ass was a disaster, as was the hokey fake blood of the closing shot. And the Dark Order becoming AEW's big bad was so awful that Tony Khan was pressured into taking control over the creative. But still, the show was never ever WCW 2000 bad people. Do not forget that.